Hello. Yeah, much has been said about growth. About 10 years ago, uh, many of African economies were part of the fastest growing economies in the world. And so I think that gave a, a bad narrative, false narrative that Africa was actually developing. But no, it wasn't. Economic development and economic growth are not the same thing. So why didn't the economic growth in Africa lead to economic development? I'll address that. But let's understand this. Why were they even growing in the first place? They were growing because they were exporting raw materials in larger quantities than they were before, which is exactly what I'm saying. They were just fulfilling the role given to them in the world economic system today that puts them at the bottom of the food chain. Provision of raw materials. More leads to economic growth, less keeps you where you are. Now, the economic growth never translated to the economic development because no infrastructure for manufacturing was invested in or done. There was a lot of capacity building, there was a lot of aid, there was a lot of assistance, no economic development. That's why Africa is still poor in spite of all its mineral riches. Why weren't the right decisions taken? I think they were. So why weren't the right decisions implemented? There you go. They were never implemented. A lot of people like myself talked about, hey, start manufacturing. But you see, Africa had obstacles. They have enemies. We still have our enemies. We have enemies. But let's not take it personal. It's not a race issue. It's not a color issue. It's an economic issue, economic warfare issue. So it's not personal. People that are up there will want to always be up there, and they'll do everything they can to keep people that are down so that they don't come up. Like I said before, if Africa was to start manufacturing now, if Africa was to bite the bullet and do what it needs to do, which is not going to be funny, eventually it will win. It'll break. You can't keep such a continent and people down, but it'll come with a lot of resistance from the industrialized countries. That's for sure. And it's nothing personal. I don't even think they have a choice but to resist. Right now, they're doing it very well. They're doing it very well. There's no economic development. Sometimes there's economic growth because the volume of raw materials being sold increases, and it deceives people into thinking yes, economic. But no, the infrastructure still remains the same. How do they do this? By pumping in aid. What does aid do? Aid just maintains the status quo. In fact, it helps corrupt governments stay in place. All right? Standardization. Whatever you're producing, we don't accept it if it's not in this way. And then you say that to the next African country and the next African country, and so everybody's producing the same thing. That gives you power. Why? Because if one African country doesn't accept your price, you can go to another one. And that African country is in trouble. You see? And so these are ways that are used to keep the status quo the way it is, and that's bad. Africa needs to understand these things, take a step back, and prepare itself mentally, spiritually, everything, to make the sacrifices it takes to break away from the current economic system of the world so that her children can be greater. Right now, we're just the milling ground in human resources for the West. Our best go there. And the rest they don't want to see. Come on. Nothing personal. You know, who knows if the rules were reserved, whether reversed, whether it wouldn't be the same. But pretty much that's why Africa is what do you call it, underdeveloped. Okay, now destroyed food self-sufficiency. That's a big problem. Recently, there was you remember the Ukraine war started now. It's like 2-3 years now, and there was a scarcity of bread. in many African countries because there was no wheat. And I was like, whoa, why? What is the connection with Ukraine and wheat got to do with us having, bread, enough bread to eat here? And then, it dawned on everybody that we don't even grow wheat in Nigeria. I'm talking of Nigeria now. Nigeria is Africa's most populous country. We don't. When did we stop? Nobody knew. We don't even do cotton any longer. So our apparels, our clothes are all imported. But let's go back to the one of food self-sufficiency. How did that happen? How could many African countries be dependent on food on the West and industrial countries? Well, I'll give you a story that happened sometime in the 70s to Malawi. And the IMF, they had to take, debt is another thing. We'll talk about debt. But they had to take a loan from, they thought they had to take a loan from the West. And the IMF, one of the finance minister of Malawi broke ranks when there was famine and Malawi could not feed its own people. And he broke ranks with the silence. And he said, listen, the reason why we can't feed our own people is because we emptied our grain reserves. And the reason why we emptied our grain reserves was because we were asked to do that by the IMF. Wow. Now, why would that have to happen? That's not good. That's almost evil. Hello? But that's it. That's it. Because if you can't feed yourself, you're dependent on whoever feeds you. You're poor. So that's just an example to give you of what is happening right now. So go back to that question again. Is Africa poor because of its own fault? No, not so. Why is Africa poor? Because of a combination of factors. A combination of conquest in the past, colonialism from the conquest, oppression, and systematic and well-calculated economic and political decisions to keep Africa at the bottom of the food and economic chain in the current world system. That's why Africa is underdeveloped. Can Africa do anything about it? We can do a lot. Are we doing much about it right now? We'll see. All right. So go to the board and the next lecture will be there, okay? We'll talk. Bye-bye.